It's time to play ball. I'm Trevor Rogers, joined by Bobby Rose. Today on In the Dugout, we talk a little bit more college baseball.
Oklahoma State and Oklahoma are on deck, as well as the future of the Norman High Tigers, Trevor. We'll also touch on pitcher regulations and the dangers of overpitching.
With that being said, you're now in the dugout.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Glad you joined us today. Trevor, let's get into our first topic here today. Let's just jump right in. Norman High School, they've been struggling for the past 4 years under Doug Gillis. They've been dominated by crosstown rival Norman North and have failed to make it to the state tournament for a few years now. Trevor, what do you think that Norman Tigers should expect this year?
Well, the Tigers have been dominated for the last 4 years by their crosstown rivals, the Timberwolves. But the Tigers at one point were the pinnacle of what high school baseball was on this side of the state and across the state. That being said, you know, as soon as Coach Terry Fisher stepped down in the late 90s, Doug Gillis took over and drove this program into the ground. I understand he had some internal problems and some commitment issues from the kids that he was getting into his school and, you know, the kids that he was getting into his program. But eventually players lost interest. They no longer wanted to play baseball at Norman High. It just wasn't an issue, and it wasn't a priority for kids to play baseball at Norman High. You know, that's why you saw them struggle. They just didn't have the talent pool.
And a lot of that is because of Coach Gillis. He sometimes just drove people away from the program, but I think that's going to change now under new head coach Pete Sandrardi, who's had some success over at Bixby. I believe they were in our top 10 in 6A last week, a lot of because of what Sandrardi left in the cupboard for their new head coach over there. I feel like he'll be successful at Norman High. It'll probably take a few years. Obviously, the new transfer from Norman North, Paul Reed, helps a lot. But that being said, I don't expect any big things from them for at least the next 2 or 3 years, because the Norman Tigers are indeed pretty young.
Right, I completely agree. And, you know, the Tigers are going to be young with, Paul Reed's got to sit out this year. They've got to completely rebuild their pitching staff, and they got to get going, and they've got to get some hitters in there. Otherwise, you know, it's the first couple of years, it's going to be rough. But Sandrardi, he'll get them motivated, and he'll get them back to where they need to be.
Absolutely.
Now, moving on. The Oklahoma State Cowboys have been in the middle of the Big 12 for the past couple of seasons. Bob, what's it going to take for the Cowboys to get back to the high-caliber play in conference this season?
Well, Trevor, there's one thing that they have to do to get back to where they were. Obviously, Oklahoma State has a great tradition in baseball. I mean, Robin Ventura and just a numerous amount of other players that have come through that program when you look at it. But, Trevor, that being said, the thing they have to do is get rid of Frank Anderson. Listen to these records over the past 3 years. They went 35-25 in 2009, 2-2 in the postseason. In 10, they went 28-26 and didn't even get to a regional. Then you go to last season, they were 33-24 and went 2 and barbecue in regionals. Didn't even make a super regional. Didn't win a game in a regional. Frank Anderson is not recruited well. The talent he has had, he hasn't coached very well. I mean, it's just when you can't get more than 10 games over 500 at Oklahoma State University in baseball, you have a big problem. So I think they need to move on from the Frank Anderson experiment and go after a couple of guys like Mike Gillespie at UC Irvine or Rob Walton at ORU, who've both had a bunch of success in their careers as head baseball coaches.
I completely agree that a lot of it comes down to recruiting. The facilities that OSU has right now in their top tier programs, like football, their money generating programs, their football, basketball, their facilities are fantastic. But the non-revenue generating programs, baseball is horrific with their facilities, and you're not going to be able to get these top-tier recruits. I know that Oklahoma just put in a new indoor practice facility and updated their stadium with new scoreboard, jumbotron, new seats. You know, what they're doing down there is what needs to be done in order to get these high-caliber athletes. OSU's not doing that. A lot of the seats, I mean, everything in there is still metal. It's, circa 1980. And until OSU gets on that level and gets to gets to
Right.
the profession, that professional type atmosphere with what they're going to be able to put out there, that they're not going to get the players that they really need in order for them to compete.
Right. But now let's move on to the next topic. Trevor, we're going to stick with college baseball, however. Teams across the country open their seasons tomorrow. Trevor, what matchups are you interested in the most?
No, the first one I look at, sticking at in-state baseball, I look at Oklahoma opens up in the streets of Malibu, playing against Pepperdine University. Oklahoma comes into the season ranked 19 according to Baseball America. A couple of top 20 prospects in this game, Jonathan Gray and Scott Frazier. Scott Frazier for Pepperdine, both pitchers throwing around 92 to 94 miles an hour with the potential Jonathan Gray has the potential to get his fastball up to 97. That's what Coach Galloway said. So I really think I think that Oklahoma, it's going to be interesting to see how they come out and fire out their first game. They open up the series tomorrow in California, and then one team that I really look at is to see that I want to see teams like Rice. They open up tomorrow. Miami also opens up tomorrow. So it's going to be a good day for college baseball.
Yes, it indeed is. And here's the 3 series I'm going to look at to start off the season. First is number 25, Cal State Fullerton, taking on Florida, the number 1 ranked team in the country. That series is going to be an excellent one. Cal State Fullerton, obviously always a great program in baseball. Florida has been very good over the last 10 years or so. Then you look to a top 10 matchup already, the first series of the year, 2 top 10 teams going at it in Vanderbilt and Stanford on the campus of the Stanford Cardinal. That will be a great one. Both teams with amazing baseball history. Watch that. That is going to be maybe the best series of the pre-conference season in all of baseball, college baseball. Then I look to number 22, Ole Miss, taking on number 15, TCU, the new Big 12 team. They won't be in the Big 12 this year, obviously, but both of those teams in the top 25 as well. Those are some series and matchups to watch tomorrow.
No doubt. No doubt.
Trevor, the 6A state tournament is in Tulsa at One Oak Field almost every year. Is it fair to West Side teams that they have this head-to-head every year?
And Tulsa? Absolutely not. No, it's not fair that the state tournament's over there because you have teams from the west side. It's a really balanced field usually that come over and compete in the state tournament every year. So having it at One Oak Field, it's a beautiful facility. I'll give it that. But Oklahoma City, Bricktown Ballpark, they've bid on it before. I know that it's been tried to be lured over onto this side of the state for the past few years, but it's not fair. And it comes down to competition. It gives Eastsiders a little bit of advantage. Especially considering in all other sports, the state tournament is usually on that side of the state on that level. So it's not fair for these West Side teams to have to come over there and, take time out of their schedules in order to, stay over there. It should be balanced and should go back and forth. Each team should have a shot.
Well, I look at it more from the standpoint that the West Side doesn't get quite as many teams once you get past the initial state tournament. They don't get a lot of teams into the finals. The East Side, Owasso, obviously, and Broken Arrow get most of those championships. Union every now and again, Jinx every now and again. The East Side of the state is where the power in the baseball world is, especially now. And One Oak, obviously, is bidding on it. Whether or not Bricktown bids on it or not, the real question is, if they bid enough. Obviously, they haven't in the past. Otherwise, OSSA would let them play in Bricktown. But, of course, One Oak continues to get it. And until a West Side team actually breaks through and makes it and wins a state tournament and Bricktown bids a little bit more, I don't see any reason for it to change, any drastic reason for
so
it to
you're
change.
saying it should be a make it take it
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, so if you win it, see, I don't agree with that, but hey, it is what it is. Anyway, coming up on in the dugout before we go to break, we've got Michael Kinney from the Norman Transcript. He'll be joining us in the bullpen. Also, we'll talk about pitcher regulations and what you should do on your fantasy roster coming up after spring training. That's coming up on In the Dugout here in a minute. We'll be right back.
coincidence the Toyota Tundra has received the most dependable large pickup award from J.D. Power and Associates. Not once, not twice, but 6 years in a row. Now that's a statement no other truck can make. The full-size Tundra from Toyota.
Welcome back to In the Dugout. I'm Trevor Rogers, joined by Bobby Rose. We continue our delving into the baseball universe with the question concerning pitcher safety. And Bob, I want to ask you, should pitchers be limited to innings thrown per game to prevent injury?
Trevor, we've talked about this a couple times, off the air or whatever, and we both pretty much agree on this topic that yes, they absolutely should be monitored, especially in high school and the upper levels, obviously, because these pitchers, their arms are so fragile. Like they can throw 99 miles an hour, but the slightest tweak to the throw could completely destroy their arm. You hear stories about pitchers, juniors and sophomores in high school already having Tommy John surgery. I mean, that's just absurd. It's too young. These pitchers are throwing too much. Our producer, DJ, talked about a coach when he was growing up, told him that you should never throw breaking pitches until there's hair in your armpit. I completely agree with that. It's going to save your arm. You should watch innings. And another thing that I believe to save pitchers that you don't necessarily agree with is I don't think you should let the pitchers hit. It's too dangerous. You're risking that's asking a huge amount of these pitchers that already do so much with their arms and risk so much with their bodies. Why would you risk an unnecessary injury by letting them hit? You should definitely watch the innings thrown.
Sure. And, even though I'm a Red Sox fan, I'm more of a National League guy, and I think pitchers should bat. But no, I understand what he's saying there. I look at it, and don't think I'm crazy for saying this. The Little League World Series is actually where I stemmed my argument from. And they do keep a pitch count. And they have a set rule. And from what I've read, Arizona, Colorado, Texas, Georgia, they're all starting to put pitch counts on how much these kids can throw per inning, and I think Oklahoma should be next on that list. I really don't want to see these kids with what they training. The pitching coaches in Oklahoma are good to an extent, but you don't get that training and you don't get that weight conditioning that you have at a high level in order for these kids to be able to throw as hard and as long as they do. So a lot of it comes down to conditioning, and I really think that the more as these kids grow older and when they get more professional coaches, then that you can negate that pitch count. But for now, monitor it and don't let them throw as much so they don't wind up throwing out their arm by the time they're 19 years old.
Absolutely. And speaking of pitchers, that actually brings us to our next topic. Pitchers reporting for spring training assignments within the next couple of weeks, I believe, maybe even next week. Obviously, that means spring training is right around the corner. So let's talk a little fantasy baseball. What do you look for in spring training to help you draft for your fantasy baseball team?
One thing that I really like, I don't put much investment into spring training for my fantasy team, but with the exception of, maybe later on the year, I go back and I look at the numbers and I look at the young guys that are going to be called up this year and, have a chance to make an impact. And you can find somebody, and you can find some of these guys when you look at the matchups that they have between the young guys and the veterans, when you have the young pitchers versus the Prince Fielders of the world, the David Ortizes of the world. See if they're not going to get shell-shocked by those guys. And you got to look at how the young guys hit against the Roy Halladay's and the Cliff Lees of the world. that's what I look at, to see how the matchups, how the young guys compare against the veterans, and that's how I look at and see if I'm going to maybe draft these guys or pick them up in free agency later on.
I guess I put a little more stock into spring training than you, because I think a lot of these guys get enough innings that you can kind of tell how their season is going to go. I mean, obviously there's highs and lows in a baseball season. You get on tears, you go on cold streaks. But if you look at their spring training numbers, a lot of the times you can tell who's going to have a good season. Alex Gordon, for example, obviously I mentioned him because obviously I'm a Royals fan. Last spring training, he had an excellent spring training, and that actually translated over into the year, and he had his best year as a Kansas City Royal last year. So I look for things like on-base percentages, averages, RBIs, obviously, strikeouts, because these pitchers get such limited innings that the higher strikeout counts probably are going to tell you that pitcher is going to get a ton of strikeouts during the regular season. Then you look at steals, obviously. Fielding percentage is probably the most important thing you need to look at in spring training, because that's going to tell you where your good fielders are going to be. Maybe you can pick up a utility guy that can give you a good fielding percentage. And then the other one is saves, because a lot of these closers are tested out in spring training to find out who the closer during the regular season will be for these clubs. Trevor, I think it's about time for a break. But when we get back from this break, I believe we're going to be joined by Norman Transcript writer Michael Kinney. Is that correct, Trevor?
Yeah, Michael Kinney is going to come on with us. And then after that, we got the high heat segment coming your way on In the Dugout. Going to have a little fun with our producer, Mark Jeffries. So we'll be right back on In the Dugout. You guys stay tuned.
I'm Roy Williams.
I'm Charles Howell.
I'm Mark Clayton.
I'm Tommy Harris.
Curtis Lofton.
Gerald McCoy.
I'm Chris Chamberlain.
What's your fate?
What's
your fate?
In life, you have choices, decisions. Then after your decisions, you have consequences.
You have to step up and choose to be different. What do you want to do? What do you want to be?
What is your fate?
What's your fate?
What's your fate?
What's your fate?
What's your fate?
Whether you're a weekend warrior or a high school athlete, injuries happen. The physicians at Oklahoma Sports and Orthopedic Institute are ready to help you get back to your game. This team of highly trained orthopedic surgeons and sports medicine physicians specialize in the prevention and treatment of all sports-related injuries, as well as comprehensive spine care, joint replacement, and fracture care. If you find yourself on the sidelines, call 360-6764 or log on to osoi.com. OSOI. Get back to your game.
Welcome back to In the Dugout. I'm Trevor Rogers, joined by Bobby Rose. Last week we talked about Norman North High School, and this week we talked about Norman High. We've also hit on OU and OSU. So we talked about the Oklahoma teams, and to give us a little more insight into that, we have him warming up in the bullpen from the Norman Transcript. We welcome him, Mr. Michael Kinney. Michael, thank you very much for joining us today, and how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing today?
We're
fantastic.
Pretty solid. Absolutely. We're excited to have you here today.
Hey, Michael, last season, you got a chance to cover both of the Norman teams. Norman North, it's fair to say they had an absolute collapse and last season in the playoffs. Do you think that may carry over into this season? And what do you foresee happening with the Timberwolves this year?
It's gonna be tough to see. They lose so many starters. I think it's 8 seniors from last year are now gone. Off a team that went 29-9. They had one of the stronger pitching rotations in the state, and they got beat by Choctaw. And those the two games they lost really weren't even close. So when you try to get that out of your head and try to push on to the next season. It's going to be a tough job for Coach Ayler to be able to get that into the team's psyche that this is a new year, a totally new year. You have to get past that and move on. I think they can. I don't think they will be as good as they were last year, but if they use last year's collapse to their benefit, they could be one of those gritty teams that can make some noise.
Okay, Norman High School hired new head coach Pete Sandrardi. What do you think the Tigers should expect this season, and what do you think it'll take to get them back to where they once were?
Well, the Tigers are almost the exact opposite of North, in that they only lost 3 players from last year. One of them was Travis Remillard, which is a tough loss, but they returned many starters that went 9-7 down the stretch of which ended up being one of those good seasons, bad season type things. So I think they can be good. I just don't know if they have the talent to be able to compete with the Wassos, the Broken Arrows, and the Edmond Santa Fe. So it's going to be interesting to see how they develop under first-year coach and see what they can do.
Yeah, Michael, we're going to move on to college baseball real quick, and I want to pick your brain about the Pokes up there in Stillwater, and I want to know, why does OSU continue to struggle in the Big 12, at least in the last 3 years?
I just think everyone else has caught up with them. You know, they used to be one of the dominant teams in the country, and especially in the Big 12 and the Big 8 even back then. But you've seen Oklahoma, you've seen some of the other schools that start to raise some of that talent that used to always go out to Stillwater. I mean, it's almost like every other sport, the same way Oklahoma was in football. Oklahoma State in baseball is just having to share the wealth with a lot of the other talents. And then conversely, they've also had a lot of their talent end up going to the pros instead of staying around for 3-4 years at a time. So now it's just they're having to learn a new way of doing things. How can they contend in the Big 12 when they're not the overwhelmingly dominant program? And that's good for all the other teams, so it gives them a chance, as you've seen Oklahoma these last couple of years.
Okay, now let's talk about the team a little closer to you, the Oklahoma Sooners. They open up the season tomorrow in Malibu against Pepperdine. When you look at this team, obviously they lost a lot from last year, and a team that was expected to make a run at the College World Series. When you look at this team, who, aside from the obvious people, do you think will make a difference on this year's squad?
Obviously, you want to see, you expect to see Caleb Bushyhead have a great year, Max White, and Cody Rain. But I'm looking at some of those JUCO players that they brought in the pitching rotation. Jonathan Gray and Stephen Eckhart. If they can replace some of the talent that they lost out of those draft picks that left Oklahoma last year, and just solidify that battery, I think that Oklahoma has a chance to get back to where they were 2 years ago. Where they made a run to the College World Series. I think it's going to be important to be able to, because they have to calm down. The offense in the Big 12 this year is going to be pretty high. So you need a strong pitching rotation to be able to help you to solidify things a little bit. So you got 2 players coming in from JUCO, not the high school level, so they have experienced, at least facing some top talent. So I think if they can get their act together, or at least be able to reach those expectations, I think Oklahoma will be all right.
Michael, real quick before we let you go, the MLB season is right around the corner. Pitchers are reporting to spring training as we speak. What are your thoughts and predictions going in this year? And, who's your team and who are you looking at to make a run at it this year?
Guys, there were so many changes in the offseason. Celso going out to Detroit, Big Dog going out to Anaheim. The Yankees pretty much stayed the same. So, I'd probably have to go with a Yankees. It's going to be out of Yankees and I'm saying Yankees in Detroit out in the American League. In the National League, who knows? It's up in the air. St. Louis is I don't think they're going to be the same as they were. Since I'm a Mets fan, I love to see them, but obviously they're terrible. I would look out for Florida. I would look out for Florida. They got a lot of talent in there. Jose Reyes, which they took from us. I think it's going to be a nice little catalyst if him and Hanley Ramirez can learn to play together. So it's going to be a wide open field out there in the National League.
New ballpark and new unis, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. The new Miami Marlins. Watch out for them. Thank you for joining us, Michael. It's been a pleasure having you today. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I believe our producer is going to have a few questions for us, and we're going to be the high heat. Trevor, I'm excited. I don't know what's coming, but should be a good one. We'll be right back, folks.
Welcome back to In the Dugout. Trevor Rogers, joined by Bobby Rose. Well, we ran through it last week, and I'm really excited to see what we got this week. Mark, it's time for the high heat segment. Bring it on.
All right, I am bringing it today, guys. A beautiful day here in Oklahoma. Who said it's winter time? It's not hot outside, but I'm telling you right now, it's going to get hot in here. All right, first up, Bobby Valentine with the Red Sox. Is that a good fit? Trevor, go.
I think Bobby Valentine will be a good fit. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the Sox did after letting Terry Francona, who is arguably the best manager that the Sox have ever had. And personally, I don't think they should have let him go. I know that they had a lot of internal problems, but I think Bobby Valentine could be the man for the Sox to get it done. He's had great success with what he did in his past, career before he went over to Japan and did some managing, took his managing duties over there. I'm excited to see what Valentine's going to do with the Sox. He's got, great talent pool around him with Euclid, Pedroia. They're all going to be back and healthy this year. So I'm excited to see what the Sox are going to do.
Bobby.
I know that the Red Sox probably should have, at least contended for the World Series, if not, only make the playoffs last year. But I don't agree with the fact that they fired Terry Francona. Even with the talent level they have, you don't fire your manager after one mediocre season, after he's led you to 3 World Series titles, two. Yeah. You don't fire your manager after one mediocre season like that. And we'll see how Bobby Valentine does with that talent. But like I said, you probably don't need to get rid of Terry Francona. That was a mistake.
All right, I agree with both of you. All right, next one. The All-Star game this year. We have the home field advantage. Is that a good way to determine who gets the home field advantage?
Absolutely not. It should come down to best record in baseball, and you got to prove yourself, because it almost makes the whole it makes the season does not matter by World Series time. Home field advantage should come down to whoever's got the best record. That being said, I think if the Rangers if they get home field advantage last year, I think they win the World Series. The Cardinals made a heck of a run last year, but just because the National League won the All-Star game, I think the Rangers should have had home field advantage. They proved it all year. They had one of the best records in baseball, and that's what it should be. You've got to prove it in the season in order to prove it in the postseason.
There's 2 reasons I disagree with you on this, Trevor. One is that the regular season already decides home field advantage in the American League and National League playoffs. I think that's enough to make the regular season matter. You want to have home field advantage, obviously, all throughout the playoffs until the World Series. And I think that the All-Star Game should decide home field advantage, because you don't want to see the Major League Baseball All-Star Game become like the Pro Bowl. You don't want to see it become a completely useless waste of time. Right now,
that's what it was for years.
No, the reason these players care about playing in the All-Star Game this year or in today's time is because it matters. Because these teams that are in contention actually want to play this All-Star Game to try and get home field advantage for the World Series.
Hold on.
It makes the All-Star Game matter, which is why I think it's fine that it's deciding home
If
field
you
advantage.
ask players today how they feel about playing in the All-Star game as a deal for home field advantage, 4 out of 5 of them will say that no, it's silly.
Have
it's
you
a game.
polled these players, Trevor?
You can ask them before. This debate happens every year. With the national media, and you listen to the interviews with these players, and you talk about it's not fair because you're not only do you have to try to win a game, you also have to get your pitching staff in, and you have to get each player that's been selected. They have to get certain amount of playing time. So it's really not very fair, and it's not a fair way to win the All-Star game because it's kind of just you've got certain things because it's an entertainment ordeal. That's what the All-Star is. It's built for entertainment.
If you don't have it mean something, however, Trevor, it becomes like the Pro Bowl, and we all know how poor of play the Pro Bowl is. I mean, just look at this year's Pro Bowl. It was terrible.
Whatever.
I'm with you on that, Trevor. And it's not like that you can give them, a bonus maybe for winning the All-Star game if it's all about money? You're going to fork over $1 million per player?
Right.
On the All-Star roster if they win the All-Star game? Yeah, I'm sure they put something into it then, wouldn't they?
It's built on entertainment.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
All right, next up, best rivalry in baseball. Trevor, you're up.
Sox, Yankees. There's nothing better than Sox Yankees. It's the best rivalry in sports.
I disagree with that.
There's so much bad blood, and it's such a fun fan experience to be a part of the Sox Yankees rivalry. I myself am a huge Boston Red Sox fan, and I know it's unfortunate as I come from a family of Yankees, so it's enjoyable for me to be a part of the rivalry. It's great, especially when it goes into the postseason, and it adds a lot of bad blood, but it's just great for the sport.
Bobby?
I pretty much agree with you, but I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here, and I'm going to say it's going to be the Cubs and the White Sox. There is tons of hate in that rivalry. I tell you, I used to know a hardcore White Sox fan, and I'm telling you, those two absolutely hate each other. They are always rooting for the other team to lose. It's a lot like the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry, just on a much quieter note. It doesn't get quite the publicity that the Yankees-Red Sox gets because those are in 2 bigger markets as opposed to 1 big market. But I'll go ahead and say that it's the White Sox and Cubs.
Mark, what's your, just to pick your brain,
I'm West Coast, man. It's Dodgers-Giants.
That is a good rivalry.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That is a good rivalry.
All right, moving on. Bobby, we're going to start with you this time. Batting armor. These guys come up to the plate with elbow protection, ankle protection, leg protection. Come on. Is this necessary?
Obviously, I think the helmets are necessary.
I didn't say helmets.
Well, I don't have a problem with the shin pads either. Because a lot of times when you foul a baseball off, it goes straight down into your shin, and obviously you don't want to, that'd be bad. But I don't think the elbow pads and all that stuff is necessary. It's just you look ridiculous. I mean, and it's kind of not the way the game has always been played. I mean, you're going to take one for the team. I mean, you're going to have a stinger the next day, but I mean, it's not going to be that bad in the end.
Trevor.
That being said, I know it looks silly, but have you ever taken a 98-mile-an-hour fastball to the elbow? I can't imagine that feels good, even in the slightest. Hindering and barring injuries, these guys have way too much of an investment. These organizations have way too much of an investment in their athletes in order to have them sit out.
It may hurt for a little bit, but I mean, it's just going to end up being a bruise. And if they can't play through bruises, then they shouldn't be playing at all.
Come on, guys. Seriously? Have you ever seen a guy take a 100-mile-an-hour puck to the face? Obviously, these baseball guys have not talked to any of the NHL players. What do? You go in, you get stitched up, you come back out on the ice, and you play. These guys get a hangnail, and they go on the DL for 14 days.
I took a fastball to the face when I was when I was a kid, so...
Hey, come on. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely... They should outlaw all that stuff. If you're not man enough to get hit by the pitch, forget about it. You shouldn't be playing in the bigs. All right, next one. Let's see here.
I agree with you there, Mark.
All right. Man, I got to take that one off the list there. All right. You mentioned the Miami Marlins, the new logo, the new stadium. Logo, a good thing or a bad thing?
Bobby. It's a bad thing. I've seen the logo. It's horrible. The new Miami Marlins. It just looks terrible. They need to go back to being the Florida Marlins. That's what they've been for a while. That logo actually looked pretty good. It was. I know last week we talked about logos. I thought about saying the Marlins. I used to like the Florida Marlins logo. I couldn't say it because the new logo just looks awful. It's just an M. It looks like a clear ripoff of the Miami Heat logo a little bit with just the M. They need to go back to being the Florida Marlins. That's what they've always been. Use the old logo because the new stuff is horrible.
Yeah, I agree. The new stuff is not great. And I understand updating the uniforms because I with the logo and stuff because I thought it was a little bit 90s for them and it needed an update. But the new logo, the new Miami Marlins, it looks silly. But that being said, their new stadium is freaking sweet. I don't know.
I don't know if that's going to put more people in the stands though. Because I mean, have you ever watched a Marlins game?
Yeah,
there's probably like 10 people. There's 10
10
people in the stadium at any given time.
But did you see they've got like fish tanks? They're going to have fish tanks behind the home plate.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
It's pretty cool. All right, last question, the toughest question of them all. As a Texas Rangers management person, do you trade Josh Hamilton? Trevor?
Absolutely not. Josh Hamilton, he's got a huge fan base in Texas. That he's someone that town has embraced him and really brought him back into a positive light with the struggles he's been through. I know that he had a little bit of a relapse in recent, but what he's done for the Dallas market and what the Dallas market has done for him has been such a mutual beneficial relationship that it's been great for the Rangers. It puts butts in seats. He's an offensive weapon. He's an MVP. He's an all-star, and that's what the Rangers need. And I don't think Nolan Ryan is quite ready to get rid of a player of that caliber.
Bobby.
I agree with you there. I think that you don't need to trade Josh Hamilton. He's a human. He makes mistakes. We all do. He relapsed. He admitted it. He came out and told them a few days after that he made the mistake. He's already seeking help for it. He's just human. He makes mistakes, and he admitted up to his mistake. You don't need to get rid of him right now. That being said, I think you need to sit him down and tell him that if this happens again, that he will be on the trading block and that he needs to clean up his act and make sure that nothing like this happens again. But like I said, he's a human. He makes mistakes. It's not as big a deal as some have been making it out to be.
All right, guys. You remember a guy by the name of Mark Howe, Howe?
Yeah.
Ring a bell?
Yeah.
How many times did he get booted out and back in?
Ooh.
11 times. All right, 11 times. Let's hope that we don't have the same situation with Mr. Hamilton as Mr. Mark Howe. Sure. All right, I'm giving the edge today. Trevor, you got it. You went to the box, you took the high heat, and you smashed it. All right, nice job.
I'm going to disagree with that one. After my
this one isn't up for debate.
After my dominating victory last week, I think that there's been some behind the back dealings going on here.
No, more high heat to come, boys.
Yep. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break on In the Dugout. We're going to come back, and we're just going to wrap the show up really quick, talk about the things that we just recapped from the show today, and then give you a preview of what we got next week. Stay tuned, guys. Welcome back to In the Dugout. I'm joined by Trevor Rogers, myself, Bobby Rose. We're just going to do a quick wrap-up here. When you look at, obviously we're not going to be,
Mark Jeffries won't be here next week, so the show won't be until 2 weeks from now. But when you look at it, we'll have a lot of great action. The college baseball season will be underway. High school baseball will be underway. We'll finally be able to get a little more in depth with some analysis.
Right. We're going to more analysis. We're actually going to jump over a little bit to the college softball ranks. We'll be joined by head coach Patty Gasso of the Oklahoma Sooners. She said she'd love to come on. They're number 5 in the country right now by USA Today. Kaylani Ricketts and those girls are doing great jobs. They're doing a good job over there. So I think that's going to do it for today. I'm Trevor Rogers, and this is Bobby Rose.
We'll see you again in 2 weeks, folks. Thanks for joining us.